Hey guys, I'm Urizi. This story is all about what if Naruto was assigned to Asuma and Team 10. Mizuki never got to shoot his mouth off at Naruto the night he took the Scroll of Seals. Other than skipping a half-manic monologue from him, what exactly did this change for everyone's favorite blonde ninja? Who knows? Before we proceed with the story, please like and subscribe to this channel if you liked the video, and don't forget to check the description for the other works of the author if you liked the story. Let's start. Chapter 44, Martyr Yourself to Caution. With the wild early afternoon that had just ended, it was figured that everything else that happened afterwards would merely be calming and something of a come-down period after the minute amount of danger at the gates ended and the perpetrator was handled. That was for everyone not named Uzumaki Naruto and for the people that did not hold positions working inside of the Konoha Intelligence Division building. Goldie-kun, you are still stupid. Naruto held back a bit of a tremble at the volume of Ino's voice as he followed behind her through the halls of very plain and unappealing building. He was following her almost akin to a puppy as she strode through with a bit of a scowl on her face. Due to the fact that she was her place of assignment, she was wearing her required uniform of the majority of the force, a gray button-up suit with black belt around her waist over the top that went past her waist to her thighs, as well as her headband with a black cloth around her forehead. But this is your job, isn't it? Naruto defended meekly in order to alleviate some of the anger directed at him that Ino had bestowed upon him since his arrival. Upon the moment he walked through the door, Ino grabbed him and scolded him enough to make him feel 11 again. And everyone that brought Haku in with me didn't say anything when I told them that I wanted you to interrogate her. That's because Daddy is a captain of the force only under Ibiki and I'm his daughter/apprentice. Ino bit back without turning around to face him. 2 days and he was already putting stress wrinkles on her. It's because I'm good. That's the only reason anyone was okay with you asking for me, because they expect me to treat her like anyone else. It didn't have anything to do with you. You don't have any pull like that around the village, Buster. Yet. Naruto mumbled before straightening out once he knew that Ino had heard him. Come on. I know what I felt out there. Haku was out of it the whole time. You don't have to rummage through her mind or anything, do you? I don't rummage through minds. Ino said in an affronted manner as she stopped and turned to Naruto with her hands on her hips. It's more delicate than that. She said with a haughty sniff. Besides, you can't be in the room anyway. You're not authorized to be. Naruto's jaw dropped, to Ino's satisfaction a bit. Come into her place of work and make things difficult for her, would he? He knew she was quitting this job. Oh, she'd fix him good when she got the chance to. What? That's stupid. I'm the one that caught her. I can't even be there to find out why she was here to begin with. That's why a lot of us get specific occupations. Ino replied, more or less expecting this reaction in one way or another, because we're just Chunin. We don't get to know everything that goes on, you know. Genin get to learn all they need to know to become Chunin, Chunin learn all they need to know to run important missions and pick areas of specialty, then when you become a Jonin you get to have more say in things. My specialty is interrogation, so I get to, here's the kicker, interrogate. You don't. It felt good to say all of that out loud as it made Ino feel like all of the time she had spent proving that she was good at her job was well worth it, since she was being allowed to run interrogation on Haku, but she was expected an explosion from Naruto on the other hand. To her pleasant surprise though, it never came. Naruto just sighed and rubbed a brow. You're right. I'm sorry. I'm used to actually being kind of important though, remember? I had a lot of job titles at the capital. He got used to being something of a big shot with his hard-earned and kept position in the Guardian Ninja. Now he was back to being a Chunin in Konoha and he had to fall back into line. It's okay. Ino said, setting a hand on his shoulder as she was calmed down by this point. He had apologized and that was good enough for her. Look, I'll do what I can in there, but we've got to figure out why she came all this way. Medics that checked her over said that Haku was running off of a near overdose of military rations pills. They were the only thing keeping her body moving by the time you stopped her. For all we know, she might have been sent here to attack. Naruto frowned but gave a stiff nod. They didn't know if Haku was with Kiri or if she was still a missing nin. Either way, they couldn't just sweep this under the rug. At least she didn't kill anybody. She still fought to disable instead of kill, even while unconscious. A nod came from Ino before she set her hand on his chest and lightly pushed off so that she could start backing away. Go home. If you want me to, I can find you once we find out what's going on, and if I'm allowed to I can tell you then. She pointed her thumb further down the hall as she kept backing up. I've got to get to work, so I'll see you later. Waving goodbye and getting one from Ino before she turned to make her way to the interrogation room in earnest, Naruto turned on his own heels and made his way to exit the building. He reached for his pocket before he remembered the sign on a wall when he entered and cursed at the fact that they didn't allow smoking in there. He really needed one right then. Elsewhere in Konoha, with Shikamaru. Instead of walking around the village that day with the stir-crazy Naruto, Shikamaru chose to stay home and get reacquainted with the comfort of his bed. There was no way he was taking a mission when Ino had asked him to wait for her because he wouldn't hear the end of her mouth and he didn't need that so soon after his return to Konoha. Now why did this mean that he couldn't spend time hanging out with Naruto during this time period? Simple, because Naruto would be just as troublesome to be around trapped in the village doing nothing as he was. It would drive Shikamaru straight up the wall, and after living with the guy for 3 years prior to this he had had enough of that for a lifetime. Still, when the emergency signal went up a few hours ago he was forced to get up and be prepared to react. It turned out to be nothing really, nothing that required a full-on response of the village's whole force, but hey, it woke him up and he wasn't going to get back to sleep. His mom was already writing his case on being lazy, and here he thought going off for 3 years on the great adventure of his life would get that lady off of his back for life. So with no more chance to sleep his life away at home he took a walk after learning that Chuji was out of the village on a mission, and with the fact that he ran into someone he knew it was much better to join them than to simply walk around on his own aimlessly, it was way less creepy for one. Thank you for helping me carry these books back to the library, Shikamaru-kun. Shiho said as she held a trio of books in her arms with a smile and a content red blush staining her cheeks. What great luck for her. He was willing to give her a hand even after so many years away, all those exotic and attractive women in the world, and he's still willing to give me the time of day to help me out after 3 years. Yes. She thought to herself. Shikamaru nodded as he walked next to her. No problem. It isn't a big deal. Really, she should thank Naruto for making the scroll he was using to lug the tomes around. Ah, at least she was grateful, and normal. Normal enough by his standards. She wasn't looking to kill him or eyeing him up to wait for a mistake, so those were points in her favor. So how have you been? And now he was asking her how she'd been while he was gone. He did care. Sure, it could be seen as just making small talk, but where was the hopeful romance in that? Nowhere, that was where. And Shiho believed in the hopeful romance. She believed in it bad. Ah, I've been fine. Things are just moving along at work like always. She laughed a bit nervously at being put on the spot before coming up with something not so good, but, it's just Otogakure. Oto? Shikamaru asked, remembering that village from before he had left to work at the capital. Most notably he remembered how that crystal woman tore his team of newly promoted Chunin apart. What's the problem with them now? Shiho looked at him with a heartfelt frown as it brought up her situation at work. They're a step ahead of us in intelligence somehow. It's weird. We've cracked several of their codes, but whenever we do it's already changed before we can even make use of it. They're like ghosts sometimes. We hear about them causing trouble in the northern part of the country, and our border guards seem to be bypassed often. Too often. It's kind of scary. She had been told that there was a chance that it was because Orochimaru was once amongst their ranks, but even that didn't warrant these things working out so swimmingly for them. Orochimaru hadn't been in the village for over a decade, so that point was mostly moot. It wasn't like Konoha hadn't updated the way they did things since then. It was giving Konoha's cryptanalysis squad fits whenever Otogakure seemed to come up. So that means someone's leaking information to another village. That was blatantly what the issue just so happened to be. It wasn't to a major village either. It wasn't like Shikamaru hadn't had a run-in every now and then with an Oto ninja while working as a ninja guardian, and they never knew when he was coming while working for them, so it was clear that a spy was the problem. There's an ongoing investigation trying to sniff the spy out, but we aren't getting anything. Shiho said, turning her eyes in the direction of Hokage Monument. Hokage-sama is under a lot of pressure to produce the spy by his old teammates the elders Yudin and Mito Kato, supporters of Danzo-sama. When she heard no response from Shikamaru, she turned back towards him and saw him giving her a dry look. Shimura Danzo. He was Sarutobi-sama's chief rival for the title of Hokage back in the time of the first two village leaders. Then what the hell did he need supporters for? The seat of Hokage? Why would they replace one old-ass man with another? No offense to any of the people being spoken of obviously, but damn, that just didn't make much sense. While Shikamaru mused on how different things were these days, Shiho's face was burning as she thought to herself, why are you talking about your job so much? Stop dumping your troubles at work on him, he just got home, he doesn't want to hear any of that. Thanks. Huh. Shiho stopped herself berating and looked at Shikamaru confusedly as to what he was thanking her for, only to get a somewhat roguish smile from him in turn. It was actually really helpful to him to hear these things about his village and what had been going on while he was gone. He wondered what else was happening around him, and Shiho seemed to know a lot. Ino would only have gossiped about things that he didn't give two shakes about had she been in the same situation. Thanks for sharing that with me. I don't know much about what's going on these days, and as troublesome as it is, I don't want to be out of the loop. An airy and nervous laugh came from Shiho as she dropped her books to hold her hands over her cheeks. It's not a big deal, Shikamaru-kun, as long as I could help you out a bit. We're friends, aren't we? She then realized that she had dropped books in the dirt that didn't belong to her and scrambled to pick them back up. Shikamaru raised an eyebrow at her strange behavior. Okay. Strange behavior that he wasn't really unfamiliar with. Crap. He'd seen this happen before, repeatedly for some reason to both Naruto and himself, and while he had been far better acclimated to bowing himself out gracefully, because unlike Naruto he was well aware of when a girl was acting strangely, this time there wasn't the easy advantage of being able to just leave because he was back in Konoha for good. But then again, he'd never considered Shiho to be a bother like with most girls. She wasn't violent, she wasn't particularly loud, and she was notably smart. Her troublesome traits were few and far between by his standards. He didn't really know her that well, though that was something that could be fixed over time if he really wanted to give it a try. And just thinking about this whole thing was wearisome in of itself. So that put an end to that train of thought. Even when they're not being troublesome, women are still troublesome. Konoha Intelligence Division HQ, Cold Interrogation Room. Contrary to what many believed when they thought about being in front of the Konoha Torture and Interrogation Force, it wasn't always someone strapped to a table drugged up with truth serum being prodded with painful metal instruments to extract information from them. That was just a last measure, really. It wasn't really used even then unless the possible information was vital to the village's security and the safety of its citizen. No, more often than not interrogations often took place in a small room like the one Haku sat in currently. Just a plain 10x10 room with solid gray walls and a wooden table with two wooden chairs within, one of which she was seated at. Haku was grateful that they didn't just go to task on her after her body gave out in the forests just around the village. They actually treated her and allowed her to clean herself and change clothes for the first time in many days. She had been on quite a run from Mizu no Kuni. Had she been awake at the time, she would have wasted no time in telling them what they wanted to know about why she was there. It was her main reason for coming in the first place. The door to the room opened and in walked a man in a gray uniform, a black Konoha headband, and a long black overcoat. He had long blonde hair in a ponytail going down his back and had very stern features on his face. Haku figured that he was going to be the one questioning her until he merely stood by against the wall as a lighter shade of blonde female walked in. She wore the same uniform sans the overcoat and took a seat down across from Haku calmly. Ino was to be the main interrogator on this day, with her father keeping watch for security and for observation of her progress. It was how things normally went. Sometimes it would be Ibiki or another senior member, this time it was Inoichi. Hello Haku. Do you remember who I am? My name is Yamanaka Ino. There hadn't been too many Konoha ninja that would ask such a question, unless that were blonde, thus Haku did indeed remember. Yes. You are that girl that I fought in Nami no Kuni. I believe your name is Ino. Ino spared a small smile acknowledging that she was grateful for being remembered. A close friend of mine asked me to handle this for him. He was the one that stopped you outside of the village. Do you remember Naruto too? Attention to detail was heavily stressed as an interrogator, and Ino wouldn't have been worth her place in the division if she didn't notice the slight lighting up of Haku's eyes when she mentioned Naruto's name. He's the one that managed to detain you. I see. Haku said lowly as her face looked pleasantly stiff with a smile that seemed difficult to keep up. So it appears that I owe him twice now. Once for setting me on the path of my new goal and twice for allowing me to complete my mission. She then frowned. I'm the only one of my comrades from Kirigakure to make it here. The others were killed just off the coast of the mainland. I was chased for much of the way by an enemy force that must have broken off pursuit when we got too far within Hinokuni. You're a Kiri ninja now? Ino asked curiously. The last time they had met Haku had been a missing nin that had left them with the purpose of fulfilling the ambition of her former master Zabuza. How that ended up with her returning to being a ninja of Kiri Ino didn't know, unless, wait, did you overthrow the Mizukage the way Zabuza wanted? A nod came from Haku, in a way. Around 3 years ago, the Yondaime Mizukage Yagura started systematically hunting down bloodlines again with a different tactic, using an outsourced supply of shinobi from another village to handle the dirty work, Otagaku ninja. Not enough to comprise a powerful direct force, but formidable guerrilla and ambush. This led to an underground uprising and resistance that split the country in half, with those supporting Kekkei Genkai users and those siding with the Mizukage's ongoing regime. Another civil war? Inoichi thought to himself as he listened to Haku speak. Kirigakure went dark around that time. This is the first time I can say I've personally seen a Kiri ninja in front of my face in quite a while. He simply listened on to see if Ino knew where to take the conversation from there. Knowing how to steer the interrogation was just as important as getting the information in the first place. Haku picked up where she had stopped since she was not finished yet though. The infighting petered out with the disappearance of the Mizukage a year ago. He disappeared altogether, and without him as the driving force behind the prejudice against those with Kekkei Genkai, the war ended. And with not nearly as many casualties as the first time, I'm happy to say. So I became a ninja under the Godaime Mizukage, who I aligned with during the troubled times. She really is an indicator of the change in our village all herself. But you still have problems. Ino ventured as a guess, lacing her fingers in front of her face that she sat in front of her mouth tersely. Your mission was to come to Konoha, with an entire team. Instigating a war with us even a year after the official end of a civil war isn't smart. No Kage in their right mind would order that. The watchful eye of Inoichi was scrutinizing and mentally grading his daughter's performance the entire time. Careful Ino, a point like this is crucial. The time when you stop asking so many questions and start stitching together your own analysis of the truth. So you want something else from our village. And your team didn't make it with you, which means that you have enemies that aren't afraid of straight up attacking you. So you came to us for help. Ino finished, shutting her blue eyes with a sigh. I'm not wrong, am I? Or I'm not too far off base, right? From her seat, Haku was smiling peacefully at the girl sitting across from her. You've certainly grown in an interesting way, Yamanaka-san. You're correct. I've come to request assistance from your Hokage to assist Kiri's standing forces in expelling the intruders from our islands. Intruders? Otagaku. Ino didn't even need to ask the question to get the answer. Both she and Inoichi knew that was where it was going. Both father and daughter shared a glance before she continued. You're telling me that they're rooted that deep that even united your village can't kick them out. A bitter-looking Haku nodded, changing expressions at the thoughts of the vultures that took the human forms of Oto shinobi. They've remained after Yagura's disappearance and continue to try and capture as many of our ninja as they can get. At first it was only rebels, Kekkei Genkai users, but now they don't care any longer. They kill and actually have land holdings now. The leeway Yagura gave them in order to allow them to operate against us was too much. Yagura was no fool, but he gave Otagaku an inch thinking he could keep them from taking a mile. With his disappearance he was wrong. Very wrong. But that still seemed somewhat sketchy to Ino. Wait, your last Mizukage enlisted help, but now you're trying to do the same thing with us for a different reason. Orochimaru is a pox that was unleashed upon the shinobi world by Konoha. Haku said, balling her fists on the table tightly. He's a carrion of a man that has ruined more lives than should be allowed by Kami. The hate was evident to say the very least. We figured that you were the best suited to dealing with your former shinobi. The current Mizukage isn't asking you to dedicate an entire force, just a few key elements. Enough to give us an edge. Both Ino and Inoichi looked at each other before Inoichi gestured his head, directing Ino that her job was done and she could leave the room. As she did so, Inoichi moved towards the door as well prior to addressing Haku. We'll get a guard detail and you can tell your story to Hokage-sama. With Naruto, elsewhere in Konoha. This was maddening. In order to wait for any kind of word from Ino on what exactly was going on with Ino, Naruto went to the location of the gate where the entire mess had started, splitting his time between pacing around and sitting on the roof of the post for the ninja watching the main road of the gates, a post that had already been manned again by 2 more shinobi, a man with dark spiky hair and a bandage running over his nose named Hagane Katetsu, and another man with brown hair combed down able to cover one eye named Kamizuki Izumo. He'd already smoked through several cigarettes already, disposing of the butts in his own way that left no mess on the ground. Something he did whenever he was nervous, troubled, angry, etc. Anytime he was in a heightened emotional state really. The two had taken to asking Naruto questions about where he had been as it had been a well-kept secret until he had ventured back. Only now could those that previously knew about his and Shikamaru's whereabouts talk about it. It was actually impressive that Ino managed to keep that little nugget to herself for as long as she did. Either way, Naruto entertained them and himself by talking about his time as a ninja guardian, and then they made us their kings and we just left and went to the capital. Katetsu laughed and banged up on the ceiling to communicate in a way with the younger Chunin on the roof outside. Mountain ninja monkeys that stole your stuff? I'm pretty sure Hokage-sama would get a pretty good kick out of that one. You know those were summons, right? The kid summons to boot. He informed Naruto that went pale. Ha. You're lucky you didn't run into the boss summon Inma and that those little monkeys liked you, or that little story would have ended a little differently for you. Shikamaru said that mountain was too far out of the way for it to be the right direction. Naruto mused aloud to himself about how he and Shikamaru had gotten lost on the way to the capital 3 years prior. You're one weird-ass ninja, Naruto. Izumo chuckled, his feet up on the counter of the booth, trying to relax during the boring job. No one attacking the village would come through the gate. They'd go over the wall elsewhere. The gate was for legal visitors to have their credentials checked and filed for the duration of their stay. Protocol was boring as hell. Katetsu sighed and shot a short glare at his partner. Yeah, it's a damn shame when a kid at least 10 years younger than me gets more action-y missions than me. He then elbowed Izumo in the side a few times. If only someone, and I'm not pointing any elbows here, manned up and let us take some missions outside of guard work or cross-country patrol. Then maybe we'd have some cool work again like a ninja guardian. If you want to try that murderer's row, go ahead and do it. Naruto said glibly, poking his head down in front of the booth opening to give Katetsu a dry look before blowing smoke inside. Back to back to back to back missions, again and again. You have no idea how many people want to kill nobles. And then there's the personal stuff you get into that you have to deal with. Oh, and Ero-sensei's stupid-ass stuff from his past coming back to bite me in dash. Ow. Naruto started to complain when Katetsu reached out and grabbed his nose to tease him for hanging down in front of the booth. Alright. I hear you. Being a ninja guardian is 7 different pains in the ass. Blah, blah, blah. Man. Asuma didn't complain about it when he got back. Asuma didn't even talk about it at all. Izumo said as he broke his partner's grip on their helpless blonde junior. He didn't tell us any kick-ass stories either. He just called us runts. We're fucking 3 years younger than him and he called us brats, the jerk. Well, the thing is, I'm scarred for life. Naruto remarked convincingly as he took his place sitting back on top of the station. I can just talk about the stuff that happened to me because if I didn't vent I'd have 3 stress ulcers by now. I'm pretty sure Asuma-sensei's stories are worse because he was a member back when there were actually 12. Either that, or they were easier going because there were 12 and the workload per ninja was lighter. What kind of a fight scarred you for life? Oh, it wasn't any fight that did it. It was the people around me, that I saw every day, that I worked with and trained with. Naruto's eyes started widening and his pupils started dilating as if he were flashing back to something traumatic, even our lead medic Nin. Tsunade Bachin. Oh, Shizune was the only one that was always cool. And Ero Sennin, that bastard. One time I came back from a mission and I found him in my quarters with some girl from town. Naruto Onizuma. Naruto's internal battle with the demons of his past that were all still alive and kicking was brought to a halt when a dark blur slammed into him like a missile and knocked him off of the station to the ground. He was about to place his attacker in quite the debilitating joint lock for interrogation purposes until he got a good look at the large milky eyes looking at him excitedly and took in the rest of the person before him, Hanabi. It was indeed Hanabi, still with her long dark brown hair and her sleeveless V-neck shirt with the mesh top underneath, but she now wore a dark blue skirt with mesh leggings that went to her thighs, and the most prominent thing of all, a Konoha headband wrapped around her neck. She was more grown up than when he had left, looking more like the recently graduated Konoha genin that she was as she got off of him with a pleased look on her face. "You're back. Where did you go? Did you bring me anything? Did you learn anything else amazing? How strong are you now? Do I look stronger? Am I pretty, Onizuma? Can we fight again?" All of these questions were asked in rapid succession. Naruto blinked and got up off of the ground before setting his hands firmly on Hanabi's shoulders, taking a deep breath, and giving her his astute answer. "Good lord, little firecracker, how am I supposed to respond to anything you just said? I think that was the longest run-on sentence in the history of mankind. Did you even take a breath that whole time? Jeez." Hanabi pouted and crossed her arms over her maturing bosom as she turned away from Naruto. "You're still so mean." She then looked back down the road she had just sprinted down when she saw Naruto in the distance with her Byakugan. "Where's Hinata Onizuma? She's so slow, I swear she was right behind me," she said, ignoring the snickering Izumo and Kotetsu inside of their booth. Hearing that one of his friends from the academy actually happened to be in the village, Naruto's face brightened up. "Oh, Hinata's with you? Where's she at? I want to say hi." Looking around normally, Hanabi couldn't see her sister, but she then turned her Byakugan on and pointed her out for him. "She's over there, behind that row of trees lining the road. Come out and say hello to Naruto Onizuma," she finished, shouting towards Hinata, who let out an audible eep at being called out. At this point Izumo and Kotetsu couldn't hold in their laughter anymore and they both let it out, pounding the counter of their station humorously. It was just too much. From her place behind the tree, Hinata was close to hyperventilating before she bit her knuckle to calm herself down. "Come on, this is what you've been waiting for, isn't it? Go out and talk to him, he isn't going to bite you." But Naruto-kun got so handsome. Grr, of course he got handsome. You didn't expect him to stay the way he was, did you? Either way, Hanabi had already told him that she was there, and if she didn't come out soon he was going to think she was weird. She wanted to make a good first impression on him after all. That settled it. This was it. She was going to go out there and charm Uzumaki Naruto and there wasn't anything that was going. "Hey." Right at her side Naruto greeted her cheerfully with a wave and a grin. "Long time no see, Hinata." He couldn't help but look her over because it was a night and day difference from how she used to look. She really grew up. Her hair had grown longer down to her waist and her body had a much more adult curve to it. Her outfit had changed as well to a hooded lavender jacket with white sleeves and lavender cuffs unzipped enough to show a mesh shirt beneath it, dark blue pants, and high-heeled sandals. Her headband still sat around her neck the way that it always had, and her face was red. Very red. At least that hadn't changed. Having Naruto come right up to her instead of her going up to him threw Hinata's built-up confidence all out of whack and she simply stared at him olishly for a moment until she got herself under control. Hello Naruto-kun. She mentally applauded herself for keeping it together long enough to get that out. It was a start, now all she had to do was keep her voice steady. Steady and confident, or at least just steady. "Welcome home. It's good to see that you're safe." "Ah, thanks a lot. It's good to see you too," Naruto replied as Hinata managed a smile at her small victory of managing to elicit a bit of a conversation out of him without stammering harshly or barely being heard. "Damn it though, all you girls just got super gorgeous while I was gone. It's amazing. You're beautiful, you know." Telling a girl he thought she was attractive wasn't a big deal to Naruto. If it was the truth then it was what it was. It wasn't like he was Jiraiya just saying whatever he had to in order to charm his way into another free drink or a girl's pants. He was just being honest. If a girl was pretty, she was pretty, and he knew what pretty was. It was that simple. It was mostly Jiraiya's fault for forcibly desensitizing him to the form of a stunning woman. The thing was though, that this often got him into more trouble than it was worth for the last 3 years. But that was another story altogether. For Hinata however, Naruto's attention was firmly on her. She had his undivided attention, and he had openly called her beautiful. She had dreams that started like that. Hanabi wasn't standing right there smiling sweetly at the two of them in those dreams though. That actually helped to sober her up and keep her from overanalyzing things and freaking out. She had to give her little sister a thank you gift later. Naruto-kun is very handsome too. She almost couldn't believe that had come out of her mouth even as quietly as it did, but it wasn't really heard because Hanabi had diverted Naruto's attention again trying to show him what she had learned while she and Hinata had been out on this little training excursion. Thus she reminded herself to take back her thank you gift she had originally intended for Hanabi for her actions beforehand. Yeah, but you still can't beat me little firecracker. Naruto chided, giving her some patronizing pats on the head much to her noble chagrin. Hinata could at least take some solace in the fact that Naruto was able to keep her little sister down a notch despite her skill as a genin. Listen to your sister's advice alright, because you're still a rookie, and Kami knows I needed some advice when I was your age. Another heartfelt smile came from Hinata, as Hanabi had taken much of Naruto's advice in the past and if he was telling her to defer to her older sister she would probably do it. Such consideration, Hanabi-chan is training for the upcoming Chunin exams. Hopefully her first time with them will go better than mine did. She thought with a sadly reminiscing smile. I'll win just like Naruto on Asuma did. Hanabi boasted confidently, I'll show everyone what the heir to the main branch of the Hyuga clan is capable of, especially Konoha. She unconsciously activated her Byakugan out of anger of thinking of fighting Konohamaru but her expression turned normal again soon thereafter. Hinata Onisama, that girl is coming this way. What girl? Naruto thought to himself, looking at Hanabi curiously. While doing this, he missed Hinata activate her own Kekai Genkai and glare at the incoming person that Hanabi had been speaking of. A moment later Ino landed in the vicinity dressed in her usual purple clothes instead of her Konoha torture and interrogation uniform. Ino-chan. You're seriously hard to find. Ino said first and foremost, pointing at her recently returned teammate, what are you doing all the way out he-? She stopped asking her question mid-sentence when she saw her chief rival of sorts glaring a hole through her in a Byakugan-enhanced manner. Hello Hinata. Ino. What brings you here? Hinata responded rather coolly in return as she turned off her Kekai Genkai as if Ino didn't matter enough to use it against. I was just having a conversation with Naruto-kun. I ran into him at the gate. Then why are you behind the tree line? Ino quipped in return, knowing that she must have hidden back there like when they were younger. Some things just didn't change, even if she did become a little lioness over the last 3 years, seems like a strange place to talk to a friend. Anything you want to confess? Or was that actually why you took Goldie-kun back here? Without saying anything, Hanabi grabbed Naruto's hand much to his confusion and stepped back out of the way as the two older girls had something of a standoff. What the hell's going on? Naruto whispered. He felt that if he did something to disturb the situation bad things would happen. Are they about to fight? He knew a fight brewing when he saw one. Onisama and Yamanaka-san don't really get along that well. Hanabi whispered back to him, glad that at least he understood how precarious this whole thing was. They're polite about it, but they fight a lot. They won't hear though, not in front of us. She was not about to mention the reason for their mutual strife. Exposing her sisters, and by proxy Ino's, crush on Naruto before either of them simply came out with it themselves was against an unwritten code. Not hearing any return comments, she looked up at Naruto's face and paled at the indomitable look on his face after her short explanation. Knowing what he was about to do, Hanabi quickly jabbed Naruto in the back of his knees with her jukin and propped him up against her with her shoulder before he could fall. Little firecracker, what the hell? No. Hanabi hissed out lowly as she continued to bear Naruto's weight against her to keep him from falling. You are not going to walk over there and say what I think you are going to say. You are not going to make them stop, you're just going to make it worse. She informed him, undoing the damage she did to his legs at the same time. Now that her point was made, just let it go. Never get in the way of women that you know, fighting brat. He could hear Jiraiya's voice advising him in his head in between one of their training sessions, and just because no one's throwing a punch doesn't mean there isn't a fight going on. Whatever you do, just avoid it and let it go. If they don't bring you into it, it isn't your problem. The choice was eventually taken out of Naruto's hands on whether he was involved or not when Ino turned on her heel and marched towards Naruto, grabbing him by his elbow and dragging him off back onto the road and towards the gate. Nice seeing you again, Hanabi. Hinata. Goldie-kun and I need to go have a talk. Konoha T&I business. Team 10 stuff. You know. Hinata just watched them go with a frown on her face and a slight glower in her expression. So Ino had a built-in advantage due to Naruto being on her team? That was okay. It only meant that she'd have to make her own opportunities count when they came for her. Hanabi-chan, I believe it's time we go home. Ota-sama will probably want to hear about your progress. Oni-sama should just take him. Hanabi thought to herself as she followed obediently behind her older sister as they started walking back on the road and towards the gates. That's what I'd do if I were her. What, would he say no? Not a chance. She didn't care much for all of this roundabout crap when it came to Hinata and Ino dancing around Naruto. Unfortunately, for Hanabi, who despite being a sweet girl had also been taught to be nobility, she had also been taught that if there was something that was rightly obtainable there was nothing that anyone could do to keep her from taking it. This led her belief of male-female relationships to be not much more advanced than walking up to the person and bluntly saying that she liked them, consequences be damned. Luckily this had never been a point of contention while she was in the academy, or little Hanabi might have wound up quite embarrassed due to a social faux pas. The two sisters began walking home, but as they departed, a family of black field mice ran from a nearby area where they had been foraging around. Strangely enough though, they all wound up heading in the same direction in an orderly manner, unlike how they had been prior, acting like normal mice in a forest. Eventually they reached their destination of a young man with short black hair, black eyes, pale skin, a high-collared shirt with no midriff, black pants, and a black Konoha headband. He sat beneath a tree merely sketching away in a notepad as a large scroll sat nearby. The mice drew his attention as they turned into words on the ground right before his eyes, recanting what had been seen during their time of existence. The young man read these words with not an inflection of feeling on his face. Well then. The Kyubijin Shuriki doesn't seem that special to me. He said to no one in particular. Danzo-sama will probably feel the need to test him to find his value to the village. Elsewhere in Hinokuni. Such resolve in such a trash ninja. Seikon remarked as he sat against the trunk of a tree. The sun was unable to be seen despite the fact that it was still firmly in the late afternoon. They would get moving again at night when it was safer to do so without being seen by someone that could report the patterns of their movement to Konoha. It was obvious that they'd be catching enough heat after Haku was interrogated, as she had managed to pull too far ahead of them to catch up to. I can't believe the fucking ice bitch got away. Tayuya muttered in her own cursing manner as she and Seikon rested themselves along with the remainder of their squad in densely forested area that had been referred to as a blind spot when it came to Konoha's countryside patrol routes. Ninja wouldn't take a route like on patrol without reason given to do so, either by rumors from the area or witness accounts that knew of something within in the past. The reason being because of the limited visibility and unsuitable grounds for combat, as well as the large scope of the rest of the country with more important places to cover, making keeping a close watch there superfluous at best, as it was really an insignificant and small patch of terrain. Just as much of a risk for those within it as for those planning on heading in. How did these Otogaku or ninja know which of the few places in Hinokuni were safe to retreat to in case of a need to stay there for a short time while within the country? Well, it helped to have a man on the inside able to feed them this info from noticing the patterns of the ninja around him every single day. Now. Appearing from the dark edge of the rally point was the purple-clad Kabuto. His appearance hadn't changed a bit at all over the last 3 years, still wearing the same purple clothing as ever. There's no need for such vulgar name-calling, Tayuya. There's nothing anyone can do about any of it now. Easy for you to say. The hat-clad redhead said, averting her eyes away from Otogaku's most prolific spy. You don't have to go back and tell Kimimaro. That fucker will kill us this time. He won't do any such thing. Kabuto replied matter-of-factly, stopping by one of the unnamed Oto ninja to check him over for injuries. Fire and ice. That was what you got when you worked for Orochimaru and any of his underlings, fire and ice. You had to keep the useless ones like the man he was examining, thinking that you cared at least a little bit. That would allow hopeless people like that to do whatever you wished to them, such as send them on suicide missions or experimentation. You know that you two are far too valuable for Kimimaro to throw a temper tantrum on. Otherwise Orochimaru-sama will discipline him on wasting resources again. Anyway, she's there now. There's nothing anyone can really do about it. Orders. Seikon asked as Tayuya muttered to herself about how Kimimaro was still going to make them pay for failing. What do we do now? Do we return to Mizu no Kuni? Both he and Tayuya were hoping for a no. They seriously didn't want to face Kimimaro again. They hated that guy. Return to Otagakure instead of Cha no Kuni and wait there for your next mission. Orochimaru-sama is waiting there and plans on traveling. He requires your bodyguard services. Kabuto instructed them. Now I'm on the clock, so to speak. I've got another meeting to keep not too far from here, and then I have to return back to Konoha before any suspicions rise. They've allowed me to leave the village on medicine duties to collect materials for medicines, but I can't stay away forever, you understand. Don't risk leaving until sundown. My contact would kill you on sight just out of principle. A nod of affirmation from Seikon and Tayuya before they started chatting amongst themselves as Kabuto disappeared from their sight and his presence left the area altogether. Geez. Tayuya said under her breath, I don't see how that prick can do what he does, dancing between Orochimaru-sama, Konoha, and Akasuna no Sasori. It's like he has a fucking death wish. No. Seikon replied, wondering if he should switch with his lazy-ass brother Yukon for the trip to Orochimaru. It's more like he gets his rocks off from it. He's like a snake charmer, pushing his luck with 3 different cobras just for the thrill of it. One slip and it all ends, but the rush has to be incredible. It was kind of admirable. That man was a real shinobi. He didn't care about living in the light, and one could never tell exactly when he was lying, what was the truth, what was a half-truth, or anything. Yakushi Kabuto lived for the lie. The most powerful weapon that he had despite his skill as a shinobi that he had kept hidden from Konoha for years was not any single ninjutsu or strategy he knew. It was the truth. The truth was the single most dangerous weapon in Kabuto's possession. Because he knew things that could sink 3 different forces of the shinobi world, Konoha, Oto, and Akatsuki. Kabuto was something of an arms dealer in this regards, and Seikon could swear that he was holding his best stuff back from Orochimaru and Sasori because depending on who he was really peddling to he could influence the end of one of them or all of them. Actually, with that thought in mind. Let's go now. Seikon said abruptly, getting up and getting the rest of the squad up and into action, right now. We're leaving. Tayuya was about to berate him about how he was so stupid when Kabuto had just told them to wait until sunset when she realized that it had been Kabuto who had told them to wait until sunset in order to diminish the risk of being seen, that motherfucker. She said to herself as she gathered her gear and prepared to leave, he wouldn't. He would, and you know he would. Seikon said as they all began to move, he'd sick Sasori right on us to cover his own ass as a show that he was still under Sasori's control as a brainwashed sleeper agent. Even though he has an allegiance to Orochimaru-sama that doesn't really extend to us. An annoyed growl slipped from Tayuya's throat as they all started putting more speed beneath them to quickly get themselves the hell out of Dodge. The last thing they wanted to do was find themselves going toe-to-toe with the most powerful puppeteer in history. There was probably a good chance that they themselves would end up in his massive collection of puppets if they did. Konohagakure no Sato, Hokage's office. Haku usually took great pride in the fact that there was no foe she was unwilling to face down in combat. If properly motivated she could move to battle fiercely against even the most powerful entities in the ninja world, evidence of such being how she wished she could get a fair shot at Orochimaru even though she knew that it would probably end with her death. Because she was also a realist when it came to her own capabilities in battle. And that realism had manifested itself in the form of nerves as she sat almost as still as a statue in the office of one Sarutobi Hiruzen. He wasn't scrutinizing her. He wasn't saying anything to her at all. He wasn't even looking at her. As a matter of fact, she was certain that there wasn't even a soul anywhere near the office for his security just in case she was dangerous. He was painting. That was it. All he was doing was painting the afternoon view of the village outside of his window. She was that wary of the god of shinobi, that she was rattled just by him sitting there in his robes and painting, smoke billowing from the pipe in his mouth. And he wasn't even scowling or doing anything menacing, he was smiling serenely the entire time. "I'm sorry," Hiruzen said suddenly, surprising Haku, who jolted a bit in the seat provided to her as she waited for whatever reason she had been taken there for. "I hope this old man hasn't made you wait for too long. It's just, this time of day is good to paint the village. Early morning leaves too much of a glare and I can't make it out too well, but on the other hand I've already done so many sunsets over the years. I haven't really done many daytime pieces." Haku didn't respond though, merely keeping an eye on the current reigning Hokage as he stood up and moved from the stool he had been painting at and back to his very spacious and Seiyushian chair behind his desk, complete with crystal ball set in the middle of it and ceremonial hat nearby. Placing more tobacco in his pipe, silence reigned over the room once more until Hiruzen spoke again. Apparently Haku was not confident enough to say anything given her situation. She was still somewhat injured and still very tired. Her chakra was low and any ninja worth their salt could probably have finished her at the moment. "You chose to land in a very dangerous place. The east coast peninsula of the mainland, Cha-no-Kuni, it's a very treacherous place nowadays. I noticed, Hokage-sama." Haku commented a bit smartly before choosing to bite her tongue again in case she had offended him. She did not expect the amused laughter from the powerful man. "I figured that to be neutral lands. That was why it was chosen as the landing place for our exfiltration from Mizu no Kuni. With the isolation of your islands due to your own domestic troubles, you couldn't have been expected to know that there is a high level of influence that has been procured by the shipping magnate Gato, the head of Gato Company." Hearing of her former employer on the mission that changed everything from Hiruzen got her to pay rapt attention to him. In Cha-no-Kuni, which is basically a country that's a peninsula, commerce reigns supreme, and Gato managed to gain sizable land holdings to further his own business. That doesn't explain exactly why it was a hornet's nest of activity when my ship reached near the shore, Haku said with a frown. At this point the age on Hiruzen's face could be seen clearer than any other point, the weathered marks of 71 years of age making themselves known. "We've found that Gato has funded the formation of many different hidden bases and other military endeavors for Otogaku in something of a working relationship. Digarashi Port is his main base of operations, a town that has done nothing but go downhill since 3 years ago. It's more of a fortress now than a town, and it's swarming with Oto shinobi lent out to him as his own private army for protection. It's their gateway to the seas, as it were." "How do you know all of these things?" "Spies were periodically sent in undercover after a disastrous mission years ago got our attention towards the newest hidden village in the elemental nations and their particular interest towards that area," Hiruzen told her as he placed more tobacco in his pipe and relit it. "It's of no concern now. It soon grew too hot for me to safely keep any eyes within that town. But it was never deemed a military move, just a client hiring a large contingent of shinobi to protect his equally large land holdings. It was a rather brazen move of advancement for one's village, but it wasn't necessarily antagonistic. Nothing aggressive towards Konoha had been done, other than the fact that they had more than likely moved over the lands of Hi-no-Kuni to reach Cha-no-Kuni. As a matter of fact, it was a rarity when a Konoha ninja engaged an Otogaku ninja. You know of my own Mizukage's request, Hokage-sama?" Haku asked, hands set firmly clenched in her lap. "This is only going to get worse. As I said to your interrogation force, she is not asking for you to commit an army, nothing close. Just a few of your ninja that you can trust in dealing with the treachery of Otogaku and your former student Orochimaru." A nearly invisible flinch came to Hiruzen's face as Orochimaru was brought up as his former student. "There are very few I would trust with a matter as serious as that. We will of course reward you in a most fitting manner that we are able to provide, including the pay of an S-rank mission." Haku added, standing up to bow. "Kiri is prepared to forfeit hosting rights to the Chunin exams to Konoha whenever they are scheduled to come our way for the next several years for your assistance in this manner." A plume of smoke flew from the old man's mouth as he observed the bowing Kiri Hunternin. "Your name was Haku, correct?" "Yes, Hokage-sama. A part of me wants to say that I cannot commit a team to assist you as you ask. That doing such a thing would be reprehensible as the Hokage, to send good shinobi into a situation that they don't endeavor to involve themselves in." Haku's head lifted up from her bow with a rejected look on her face at his words. "That being said, I have no doubt that there are a good few dozen shinobi here that would volunteer to put the boots to Orochimaru if given the opportunity and excuse, of which you have so richly granted us. If they could indirectly do damage to Orochimaru's hidden village before he did damage to the sovereignty of Mizu no Kuni and its own hidden village system, it could only help the rest of the world in general. The brown eyes of Haku went wide as she observed Hiruzen writing out mission directives on a scroll for the benefit of whichever team would accept the mission. She couldn't believe it had actually worked. She hadn't even been expecting assistance to return to Kiri, let alone an acceptance of the request. Who do you plan on sending if I could ask you? Hiruzen chuckled at the fact that Haku seemed so surprised. The pay for an S-rank mission was very high, plus hosting more Chunin exams was a very big deal. That wasn't even setting aside the fact that he felt responsible for the things that Orochimaru had done and had continued to do since fleeing Konoha. I only have 2 people that I know without a doubt will wish to go. Other than that, I have 4 open spots that I will need to fill. If there are spaces open, Haku ventured to say, there are people that I would like to request would fill those spots. A raised eyebrow of interest and curiosity from Hiruzen was the unspoken response, if it is okay with you. I do not wish to be too presumptuous as you have been very gracious to me thus far. Run the names by me. Hiruzen instructed of her. I will see what I can do if they are suitable to the severe nature of the mission. Haku only smiled at him despite his limitation on who she could ask for. Choose carefully if you are that aware of the shinobi in this village that you can select who you wish to assist you. I'm quite certain that they'll be able to help. Haku stated confidently. One of them was able to defeat Zabuza Asuma despite being ambushed, and another one of them happens to be someone who had defeated me the most thoroughly in my entire career. She then decided to add something after the fact. After all, he also told me that if I ever needed his help I could ask him. Something about how a future Hokage couldn't be weak. Hiruzen rolled his eyes and stifled a groan. Naruto, who else? Dark tower room in an undisclosed location. 9 transparent chakra images appeared in a dark room. The main one, in the appearance of a man with spiky hair and strange ripple-patterned eyes, spoke first. It has been quite a while since we've all contacted one another like this. I trust everyone is doing well and have their targets tracked. A figure in the form of Deidara was the first to speak up. The Nanabi is still inside of Takigakur, he said, his image fading in and out due to interference. She's strong, and they like her, something like the village's protector of sorts. She can fly too, and I can't hold her village hostage with a bomb. The tree in the middle of it is big enough to endure my C3. Another image, this one in the hunched-over form of Sasori, spoke up next. The Shukaku is in Suna, as you know. The populace is afraid of him, but not like they used to be in his youth. He seems more apathetic towards anything other than missions that take him closer to Konoha Ninja. He seems to have an axe to grind with that village or someone in it. I'd send Itachi to deal with him if need be, if only to coax him into fighting. Kisame can help deal with his sand. The image of Kisame laughed. Sasori, volunteering us for particular jobs, and even after I was the one that took down the Rokubai. But we'll have to pass on it for now. Itachi-san and I are still searching for the whereabouts of the Sanbi. Old Yagura up and disappeared on us right under our noses. You're all fucking useless. The whole lot of you. One vulgar hologram said with what appeared to be a large scythe hanging from his back. How the hell do you lose a Kage for Jashin's sake? Ask Sasori. He did it before right under a whole village's nose. The hologram next to him said with his strange green and red colored eyes, Hidan and I just brought in the Yonbi. I'd rather cash in on some of the bounties I racked up pulling that one off. You're a greedy heathen Kakuzu. The opinion of a cultist doesn't really mean anything to me. Sasori spoke up once again to cut off the petty bickering. My spy informed me that the Kyubijin Shuriki has resurfaced back in Konoha again. He's back on active duty, and Orochimaru is causing trouble in Kirigakure. There's a chance that he's behind Yagura's disappearance. I'll investigate that, leader-sama. A hologram that showed a fully evolved pair of Sharingan eyes stated calmly and firmly, Kisame and I will go to Mizu no Kuni and track down the whereabouts of the Sanbi. We still need to find an opening to go after the Kyubijin Shuriki, especially if he's grown stronger over the last 3 years. We don't know what he's capable of. Better to give rumors time to circulate about first. We cannot seal the Kyubi until last anyway, or else it will ruin everything. The first hologram with the eerie ripple pattern eyes said, "Very well. Itachi and Kisame will be dispatched to look into the disappearance of the Sanbei. If someone has destroyed the Jinchuriki key, we will probably have to wait for it to reappear, but I don't believe it is that simple. We will reconvene at a later date to discuss how we will deal with capturing the Hachiba that never leaves Kumo's territory later." With that, the transmission of chakra images shut off one by one. Chapter 45, No Such Luck. It was hard trying to ignore, but Naruto had been doing a great job of it thus far ever since he had made it to one of Konoha's gates that morning and had met his long-standing running mate of a partner for the mission they had been informed about being dispatched on 2 days prior. Still, counting on Shikamaru to stop trying to stare a hole into the side of his head, almost the equivalent of trying to get a statue to change its expression, "Shikamaru, stop looking at me like that. What's wrong with you? That whole making promises thing that you do, it screwed us over again, just so you know," Shikamaru said as the two of them hung out underneath the arch of the open gate in the shade of the early morning sunlight. "How many times does that make this over the last 3 years? I've lost count." Naruto's expression dropped into a frown at his best friend. Was it really such a bad thing to adhere strongly to one's word? And he was sure that Shikamaru was just exaggerating. He couldn't have done it that many times. This shouldn't even count because it was from the mission to Nami no Kuni. That was like 4 years ago. We had to take a mission eventually, so why not one that helps out a friend? Only Naruto could call someone he had waged an all-out death match against a friend, just so long as he had a civil conversation with them afterwards to bury the hatchet. Of course, Shikamaru sharply remembered being put into a fake state of death by Haku, so maybe he was just a bit bitter. Well, what did you know? He had pride too. It's S-rank Naruto. That's why. What kind of a Chunin goes on S-rank missions? In return, Naruto only gave Shikamaru a chiding look and shook his head. "You're going to keep using the weird Chunin thing as a crutch to not take hard missions, aren't you? You're going to make sure we never take a C-rank mission ever again, aren't you?" Answering a question with a question, classic Shikamaru. Neither boy answered the question of the other and only sighed, as that spoke volumes on what their respective answers would have been. By this point they knew each other like the backs of their hands and worked nearly flawlessly together after years of almost being killed and walking away from battle after battle. It was something they both loved and hated at the same time because both of them were stubborn as mules at their own points. This meant that Naruto was always going to have to keep Shikamaru from trying to take the path of least resistance so that he didn't squander all of his hard-earned talent that could be used to save lives amongst other things, and Shikamaru was going to have to fight harder against or accept the fact that Naruto was not going to be content with him remaining as a middle-of-the-road ninja. That was the thing about the dynamic of how the two of them worked. They were both reaching the top of the heap in Konoha, or they were going to burn out trying. Because even though it was Naruto who wanted to be Hokage, he was damn sure taking his friends along for the ride. It didn't take too much longer for Asuma to show himself, the first cigarette of the day sitting between his lips, lit and billowing smoke as he walked up to his two former students and looked them over. "Shikamaru's up this early and he isn't dozing off, yawning, or complaining. Inconceivable." "What? Never mind," Asuma said, patting Naruto's shoulder as he started waiting along with the two for the rest of the team. "So, how's it going being back at the homestead for the first time in years?" A beaming smile came over Naruto's face at the thought of being back home. "It's great. I mean, I haven't seen everyone yet because so many of them are working, but so far I feel good." He then let out a sigh and shook his head. "This mission has great timing too, because I ditched Tsunade Bachin back at the capital." Shikamaru sharply inhaled through his teeth. "I know. I don't want to be here when she comes back to get me for that." "Why didn't you tell her you were leaving to come back to Konoha?" Shikamaru asked him, wondering how something so simple could have prevented the clear and obvious bodily harm that was inevitably going to befall Naruto once the Slug Princess did indeed locate him. She was probably storming north from the capital as they spoke. Fleeing east was just what the doctor ordered. "Why didn't you tell her?" Which was a roundabout way of saying that he had forgotten to do so before leaving. Who could really blame him? He was excited to return home and some things slipped his mind before leaving. "Either way, I'm pretty sure she knows now. It didn't hurt anybody." Asuma smirked and chuckled, listening to the two converse back and forth and casually bicker. "It sounds like it's going to hurt you." The man continued to laugh until the arrival of two more of their teammates for the mission and their client Haku. Seemingly coming straight from the office of one Sarutobi Hiruzen. The tan trench coat and mesh garb beneath only could have been one person. Oh, someone's going to get hurt and it's funny. Anko said jokingly with a rather devious smile on her face, am I involved in some way? Anko. How are you? Asuma greeted, knowing by now how to ignore the woman's more eccentric personality traits. He spared a nod to the Kiri ninja Haku who bowed slightly to him in her own polite manner as she was back in full hunter nin garb for her departure from Konoha. Fine, fine. Anko said, lazily stretching for the forthcoming travel at hand as she looked over at Naruto and Shikamaru, hello not so bratty anymore brats. Finally back in the saddle I see. In response Naruto gestured to where his blue headband was sitting back around his neck again like a bandana with the metal covering his throat as Shikamaru gestured to where the metal of his former headband was stitched into the bicep sleeve of his leather jacket. Tenzo, you're being mean to the kiddies. Say hello. The third face was a new one that neither Naruto nor Shikamaru had ever seen before as he stoically stood off to the side from the others just observing the scene. Anko, you know you're not supposed to call me that anymore. From this point my codename is Yamato. He had short brown hair, black eyes, and wore the usual uniform of the Konoha ninja complete with flak jacket, only the neck of his undersuit went up to his chin and his headband had a face guard that framed his profile protectively. It's good to meet you too. I'm looking forward to working with the both of you. Both Naruto and Shikamaru returned his greeting while Anko let out a huff. You were given that damn codename all of 5 minutes ago. I've only heard it once while I've been calling you the other one for years. I got it, I won't say it anymore, sheesh. She then observed the youngest of the Konoha shinobi in their little group. You two know what you're getting into with this mission, don't you? We had to do an S-rank mission eventually. Naruto said with a shrug. Even though he was trying to hide it, this was the kind of thing he had dreamed about as a kid, running high-priority missions of great difficulty and importance for Konoha. That was a sign that you had truly made it as a powerful ninja. On the other hand, Shikamaru just had a thorough frown on his face and smoothed his hair back as he looked up at the sky. No, we didn't have to do an S-rank mission eventually. We actually could have gone our entire lives without having to do a single S-rank mission, but what's done is done, I guess. Where's Ino? Hopefully she could be as late as possible. Delay their departure for a day at least so that he didn't have to leave yet. Ino had to prepare to leave in a different way from the rest of you guys because I'm a specialist. Dressed in her normal purple summer attire, Ino made her presence known, leveling a bit of a glare on Shikamaru as she continued to speak. It's too early in the morning to start hearing you call me troublesome Shika, so save it. Grumpy. Anko commented as Ino walked into the midst of the group with her bag slung over her back. Alright, the gang's all here, so shall we go escort our new friend here back home? Naruto, Shikamaru, and Ino looked towards Asuma as they had been expecting their old Jonin-sensei to be the squad leader, but he just shook his head and gestured towards Yamato. That's right kids. We're all your superiors here, but the main one in charge is Yamato here. Yamato nodded as he took the head of the group. I trust that isn't an issue. There were no vocal objections from any of the youngest as they had all worked with multiple superiors in the past over the course of 3 years and were used to it. Motioning for everyone else to follow him on out, Yamato led them outside of Konoha's walls and began the trek on their to-be-dangerous mission. As they began to move faster and take to the trees for better movement, Asuma looked back at the trio that used to comprise his Team 10. You're all okay with Yamato running the mission, aren't you? I can assure you that he's just as good as I am. Anko rolled her eyes as she vaulted from branch to branch along with everyone else. Real humble of you to admit that, Asuma. I'm fine with it. Naruto said first. What was there to be upset about? He was back on a mission with his team, working with the snake lady that spent the last few months before his departure training and torturing Sasuke, and a new guy. He was back on the job and meeting new people. The day was great so far, don't you worry a bit, Haku-chan. We'll find out how to break Otagaku's backs so that the new Mizukage can kick them right out of the country. Trailing behind the others, Haku spared a smile at the reassurance that everything was going to be worked out, but Anko felt the need to let some air out of Naruto's head at least for the moment. Kid, there's a little something we need to do first before we can ever even set out to Mizu no Kuni, otherwise we'll never make it out there. Shikamaru let out a groan that got Asuma to thump him on the shoulder. The young Nara genius knew that it wouldn't be simple and straightforward. It was an S-rank mission after all, and Naruto had gotten them into it over 3 years in advance. I hate you Naruto, you and your troublesome promises. Oh whatever. It's not my fault. Naruto replied, having heard Shikamaru complain countless times in a similar manner, and even if it was, if I didn't get us into these kinds of things we'd never get any stronger shika. Chanokuni, Digarashi Port. Walking through his town was now one of the most favored pastimes of Geto. Nothing made him feel like a bigger man than looking around at all of the property that he had legally obtained by buying it all out. And of course he allowed the shopkeepers and whatnot to remain there, as long as they paid him for keeping their stores in what just so happened to be his buildings. The two families that used to fight like fools over control of the port were long gone thanks to the quiet intervention of the shinobi force of his favorite ally. At any given time, upwards of 100 Otogaku or underlings would be rotationally stationed in town to keep the peace. All he had to do in exchange was provide free transportation for Orochimaru's men from Digarashi Port out to Mizuki and bring back whatever human cargo they wished. This was of no extra cost to him as well. It was just good business all around. It had been a long time since a little hiccup like the one that happened the other day had gone down, and while he was far from pleased by it, things were going so swimmingly he simply didn't care enough to be angry. Otherwise he would have demanded that every last Oto ninja in his current employ be axed for letting one of the Kiri ninja get away. I don't want any mishaps like what happened the other day again. Geto said aloud as he walked through the streets with his entire bodyguard contingent of Otogaku or ninja. At his side, the one he was actually speaking to, as the others were nameless and faceless as far as he was concerned, was Gurren, looking the exact same despite the change in years, with a look on her face that was bored and uncaring. I know Orochimaru sent you back here to make sure that everything stays shipshape. I'll have to show my appreciation somehow. Clearly he remembered just how well Gurren took care of business back before he took over, back when Konoha first stuck their nose into his at the time budding investment years prior. She didn't care too much, however. You very well should. Her eyes panned about and idly took note of how none of the populace unlucky enough to still be outside even looked in their direction out of fear. As was appropriate, I'm here now, and no other screw-ups are going to happen under my watch. I won't have the reputation of Orochimaru-sama's Otogaku or suffer fools lightly. Such a brutal woman. Geto would have wagered that if those words were tangible he could have chipped ice off of the bottoms of them. The multiple Oto shinobi around him had to hold back intimidated shivers as they knew she had been referring to every ninja stationed there, including them. Geto had to clear his throat to shake any possible jitters out of his voice before speaking again. Well, I wouldn't worry too much about it. Thanks to my working relationship with your master, this town is mine, the seas around it are mine to the horizon and beyond. Even Konoha's backed off for years. The most lucrative mainland port in it was all his. Of course they backed off. They have no right to be here, and trying to make an excuse would just end up in strained relations with the other shinobi nations. They'd see it as Konoha trying to throw their weight around, and Kumo most definitely wouldn't let that slide. Gurren said with a rather vicious smirk, aside from that, this place is a stronghold all on its own. Only a fool would attempt to pull anything within the confines of Digarashi Port. It just wasn't smart to try. 2 days later, Chanokuni countryside. Okay, so there are 3 objectives here for the attack on Digarashi Port. Anko said as the entire team sat on the forest floor of the deep woods for a bit of rest before moving out. Between the 7 of them there was a map of the town in question and its outlying areas, and they are to commandeer a vessel to get out to sea, cripple the ability of the enemy to pursue, and capture an enemy that can be interrogated for information on just what Orochimaru's endgame in Mizuki will be. Asuma let out a low and impressed whistle at how up-to-date and thorough Anko's map was. She was really fired up for this mission. If she was putting her best foot forward like this, sounds reasonable enough. After all, we can't wind up getting ourselves chased from shore to shore by Geto's merchant fleet. Just a band of seafaring cutthroats they were really. Raising her hand as if she were in school only to get attention from everyone that she didn't particularly want, Ino faltered a bit in embarrassment before asking her question, so, who does what? We're not all going to be traveling together to do everything, are we? That would take forever. Yamato, who had been content with letting Anko explain how they were going to proceed until that point, took over and began breaking things down further. Anko and myself will be working on getting a ship for us to use. Asuma has the pair of jobs of keeping our client Haku-san safe and making sure that we can't be chased once we get away. Lucky me. Asuma interrupted and cracked sarcastically at being saddled with 2 mission objectives. Oh well. At least his protection portion of the mission was really a formality. He truly doubted that if Haku could survive escaping a village full of angry enemy ninja that she would need protecting. You're going to be able to help with this, right? All Haku did was just give him a smile that, while reassuring, unnerved him a bit at just how calm she was. If time was any indication, she was obviously stronger than she had been when Team 10 had tangled with her in Nami no Kuni, and that was definitely going to be a plus. That just leaves the kiddies. Anko said, eliciting a unanimous glare from each member of Team 10 that actually got her to chuckle a bit before she got serious again. Snatch and grab, brats. We need you to go get someone worth a Deminoto's pecking order for Inoichi's kid here to interrogate. She'd have done the interrogation herself, but then again she'd probably have gone overboard with it. That and the fact that interrogation was Ino's job, alive of course. Otherwise we'll be walking into the same mess in Mizu no Kuni that Kiri's already in without bringing anything to the table info-wise. No sweat. Naruto felt that such a thing was easy enough. Shikamaru's jutsu could stop anyone right in their tracks and then they could just hightail it out. We'll just grab some guy, knock him out, drag him onto the ship we leave on, and that's that. He was then confused when Anko shook her head. That's not good enough. You need to take someone that you know for sure knows something, not just any random ninja. Trust me when I say that Orochimaru only tells you enough to get what he wants out of you. It's always been that way. No random jabroni, bottom of the totem pole shinobi is going to know what we want to get out of them. Well, it's not like any of them are just going to go alive either. Shikamaru muttered, hand in his cheek as he seemed to be quite bored with the before-action briefing. None of them that Naruto and I ever fought went down quietly. They'd rather bite their tongues off and die than let us catch them. We've seen it. Naruto couldn't sleep for 2 days after they did. At that point, Ino proudly pointed her thumb at her own chest as she swelled with confidence. Well, aren't you glad that you've got me with you then? I'll just sedate whoever we catch so that they won't be aware enough to commit suicide before we can get them out of town. It was a lot of bluster though, as an apprehensive thought nagged at the back of her mind. Naruto and Shikamaru spent 3 years as the daimyo's elite guard. I've got to prove that they haven't left me behind. While it might have been a little bit overkill in regards to what she needed it for, this S-rank mission was the perfect opportunity to see if she had really gotten much stronger for their sakes, and also to see just what they both had up their sleeves as well. After Ino had made her statement, Yamato nodded in agreement of what she said and continued to speak. While I won't say we have a definite window of time to pull this off, I will say that once we take a ship we'll only have so much time to get away. Why didn't we just take a ship from the south of Hinokuni and sail around and up? Shikamaru asked. This seems like more of a hassle than it should be. Because we wouldn't be safe on the open water with a Hinokuni ship. Asuma said, giving Shikamaru the information he desired. I know you've been at the daimyo's court for a few years, so you don't know, but the seas are rife with privateers, Gato's merchant navy. With Mizu no Kuni locked up in its own thing, there wasn't really a large village out that could enforce some semblance of order on the waters. That's why taking one of the ships from here can serve another purpose. Anko remarked, tapping her temple to signify that she was some sort of evil planning genius and had worked much of this out before they had even left Konoha. Big blonde brat Uzumaki can make tons of clones, so all we have to do is fly the colors of Gato Company, and if another of their ships get close we can have him make us an entire crew with henge to keep us from getting busted. Real cloak and dagger stuff. Ino looked impressed and leveled an intrigued and mischievous grin at Anko, who returned it in full form. I like that. I like it a lot. Put that busybody of Goldie-kuns to some good use. A glowering Naruto only got a few pats on the head from Ino at his temperament over the group feelings on his Kage Bunshin technique. Clearly everyone else felt the same about it, since no one spoke up on his dignity's behalf. But what was dignity to a ninja? It wasn't going to keep them alive, so who needed it? Naruto looked over at Asuma with a dry look on his face as Ino continued to pat him on the head. I'm never going to get any respect from them, am I? He asked, gesturing towards Ino and Shikamaru. Your first genin squad never really respects you no matter what you do. Asuma remarked, they know you too well for that. Konohagakure no Sato, Hokage Tower, Hiruzen's office. Taking the time to enjoy a nice sit-down and a bit of tea with one's student was something that Hiruzen could always appreciate despite his responsibilities and his busy schedule. Especially since it had been a while since doing so due to the fact that two of them traveled constantly and the third one was not to be mentioned without strategies on how to kill him being spoken in the same breath. Jiraiya shook his head and chuckled to himself as he looked through an old book with photos of his team's youth. Sensei. I'm going to have to say I'm sorry. Because if teaching me was even half as hard as it was to teach Naruto, I was probably the most rotten little bastard in the village. There were times when I felt like having Inma hurl you off of the Hokage monument, but I always thought better of it. Hiruzen admitted jokingly, why you're telling me this now instead of back when you were training Minato I don't know. There's no comparison between the two at all. Jiraiya said, looking at Hiruzen wryly, they look like each other, that's it. Naruto doesn't do anything like Minato. He doesn't fight like him, learn like him, eat like him, snore like him, nothing. Minato got everything technical that you tried to teach him in a handful of explanations, with Naruto you have to hammer it into his head, sometimes literally. But when it comes to the physical, there's no contest. How so? The curious Sandaime Hokage asked as he took a sip of his beverage. I asked him about his training when he came to visit me, but all really did was ramble mostly along the lines of, I'm awesome, you can count on that old man, so just give me the head already. Jiraiya rolled his eyes at Naruto's vague and mostly useless explanation to his village leader about his personal growth. He's not as fast as Minato of course, but even as young as he is Naruto's far stronger physically than Minato ever was. While when Minato hit someone it still hurt, that was mostly because of the speed he would hurl himself at an opponent with coupled with the strength that he could generate creating great velocity. Naruto was just strong. He couldn't let Naruto even jokingly hit him for acting like an ass anymore. He always had to dodge now, because he didn't know his own strength. But that was just one thing. I didn't teach him that many ninjutsu though. Jiraiya freely admitted shamelessly. That was something that confused Hiruzen a bit. Naruto was specifically his apprentice. What in the world did they do if Jiraiya didn't pass down techniques to him? I didn't have to. Not after he finished learning his element. He did the rest himself. Hold on for just 1 minute. That only meant one of two things. Either Naruto found his own source of ninjutsu to learn, or he came up with his own ninjutsu. Hiruzen didn't mean to sound surprised, but it was surprising. Naruto was 16, which would have meant that anything usable would have needed a year to develop first before putting it into anything that was usable. A pleased Jiraiya that was happy with how he managed to stun his sensei with his own student's progress got him to laugh smugly. Sarutobi-sensei he abused the hell out of the clone training method. After he worked out the mechanics of his style he had them do the real heavy lifting. The first part still took a year after he finished his elemental training though. The clone training method? That was the secret to Naruto coming up with his own branch of ninjutsu? Of course. The use of one clone let someone train in half the time, so how many did he use a day? Kami, it depended on what he needed done. Jiraiya said, trying to think back as he ran a hand through his hair. A lot of the time he couldn't make more than 100 or so because he didn't know how much chakra one of his new techniques would take until after the fact. He was stumbling around in the dark most of the time. He's smarter at using clones to fight now too. Doesn't just waste chakra on them anymore since all of his moves take so much of it. His lazy-ass teammate rubbed off on him a bit in that regard at least. That was all well and good, but it still left the most important question that Hiruzen never got answered. How strong is he Jiraiya? And that was the question of the hour. Before Jiraiya could open his mouth and answer in his own honest opinion, both of them felt a small rumbling. Looking down at his mostly untouched tea, Jiraiya could see the liquid in the cup quivering as the tremors got more intense, sounding out with the consistency of footsteps. Jiraiya's eyes showed pure fear as they seemed to get closer and closer to the tower and he scrambled for the open window, making sure to take his teacup with him lest it ruin his cover. I was never here, and you haven't seen me since I've gotten back. I'm not taking the heat for the brat doing something stupid. Later, sensei. Without even waiting for a goodbye, he jumped out of the open portal with extreme swiftness. And a moment later he would find out why when the doors to his office were thrown open, a pleading Shizune holding a shivering Tauntaun as they stood behind a very upset Tsunade who looked like she would maul the first sight of the color combination of yellow, orange, and blue that she saw. "Where's the brat Sarutobi-sensei?" she asked sweetly despite the look on her face. The Hokage had to be a problem solver, thus Hiruzen did the only thing he could do. Since he couldn't pass the buck, he had to postpone the inevitable blow-up for as long as he could. Have mercy on Naruto's well-being upon his return, a mission. S rank. I'm sorry, but I can't give you more details for security purposes. He then lifted the pot holding his prepared heated beverage of choice in the hopes that he could calm her down. Tea. Maybe he could still salvage his calming afternoon? Tsunade raised a delicate blonde eyebrow as she knew what Hiruzen was trying to do. Do you have any sake on you instead? Oh well. No use wasting all of that anger for being ditched at the capital if Naruto wasn't there. She was patient enough to wait for him to come back, an S-rank mission. That evening, Chanokuni, outskirts of Digarashi Port. Standing on the misty road leading outside of the seaside port town, a uniformly masked Otagakuer ninja stared into the surrounding forest with purpose as another came up behind him and got his attention. Hey, what are you doing just standing there? Why don't you patrol somewhere that you can actually see? I don't know. Does this mist seem weird to you? Weird like how exactly? We're right by the ocean, genius. It gets misty and foggy in this town all the time. The first, more suspicious ninja shook his head. No, it's just, does it feel colder than the normal mist around here to you? No. The second masked Oto ninja said with a laughing snort, you temperature-sensitive big baby. The sun's going down, no shit, it'll get a bit nippier. Stop doing Gato's drugs, you know that crap is no good for you. That last comment seemed to snap the first ninja out of his suspicious mindset due to the nature of the jibe as he went along with the other man to patrol elsewhere with him. Fuck you. I don't touch that shit. I'll just piss off Gurren if I want to commit suicide with more dignity, thank you very much. Forest surrounding the town, with the Konoha ninja. You know how to do this, Haku-chan? Naruto asked, commenting on the thick mist that had descended over Digarashi Port courtesy of the resident ice-wielding shinobi. Now that it's not being used on me, I've got to say that this jutsu is pretty cool. He didn't notice a rather envious Ino muttering in the background about how her jutsu was good too. Don't crush his mind, he's just a nice guy. You'll show him how much stronger you are the second you get the chance. She thought to herself. A gracious bow came from the Kiri Hunter-nin representative at the praise. Zabuza Asuma taught Kirigakuer no jutsu, hiding in mist jutsu, to me after teaching me the basics of his silent killing skill. Haku commented on the use of her jutsu. I'm not as good at the latter as he was, but I should be well enough so that I do not hamper Asuma-san while we move to sabotage the enemy's pursuit capabilities. Since none of them really had Zabuza's ability to navigate the mist without their eyes at all, Haku didn't make it as thick as she could have for their benefit. It was enough to move around with some semblance of cover though, and that was what it was meant for. Yamato seemed to be quite pleased with Haku's use of the famous jutsu, and at the seaside it wasn't out of place either. He turned towards Naruto, getting the young man to be attentive towards the team leader now that his attention was on him. Naruto, what do the clones you sent out have on the town? Naruto furrowed his brow in thought, trying to dredge up the thoughts that his dispelled clones had gotten on the layout of the town's outskirts. There aren't a lot of guys on patrol. Maybe 20 or so. And none of them are really stationed outside the town limits. It wasn't a military town, it was just a town that Gato lived in, and he had a large amount of ninja bodyguards. A lot of the ninja were at bars or resting and doing their own thing because of being off the watch shift. Most of them are centered around where the mansions are. At Gato's mansion to be specific. He couldn't really get his clones much closer though because of the mist, since they couldn't see that far over the distance and had to make sure they didn't get close enough to be spotted. Using their sensor technique wouldn't help as it required too much chakra to distinguish actual forms in what was being felt, and doing so would make anyone with decent awareness feel out the chakra waves. No return sensor jutsu needed. What about the docks? Asuma asked. That was the most important part. They had to make sure they could commandeer a ride out of there or their mission would be delayed, at worst it would end right there. There are a few there for routine guard work, but there's no one extraordinary out trying to get anything out of Degarashi port, so it's not heavy. Even with a stronger set of thugs to do his bidding, Gato was still overconfident, at least that was what Shikamaru saw. Now that he had hired from an actual shinobi village and had a standing manpower worth of guards, he was falling into his old habits from Nami no Kuni. Back then he just figured that there would never be any problems for him because of what his money could do for himself. Same here, only there was more muscle. That was just fine. They had more muscle too. If 6 genin and 2 jonin brought down his force in Nami no Kuni, what could the 7 of them do now? They were about to see. Okay, Brat Brigade, go get us a VIP. Anko ordered with a shooing gesture, getting the annoyed Team 10 to prepare to set out to do their part, and don't make it a crappy one. Every Oto ninja in a full face mask is a nameless loser. That's why they wear them, because their identities don't matter. Naruto almost fell over prior to jumping off with his team as they all stopped at that. I haven't seen a single one of them without a face mask. Naruto replied to the purple-haired snake mistress, not a single one. Just how elite are we talking about here, because I know none of these guys are genin. Asuma shook his head with a frown on his face. We might not know much about Otogaku's movements, but we know a bit about their sociology. Orochimaru wants his troops uniformed, more than other hidden villages. Only those that have proven themselves and survived his demands get to vary themselves with special exceptions. Remember the kids from the Chunin exam that were from Otogaku or Goldie-kun? Ino reminded him. Those 3 were pretty uniform in their appearance with their matching pants and scarves too, but as genin they weren't important enough to be given full loadouts on their gear like the adults that were somewhat proven. Rolling his eyes at how things could never be straightforward and clear, Shikamaru's wheels inside of his head were already turning in regards to working out a solution to their prisoner problem. Come on. Let's go. He said, getting both Ino and Naruto to fall in with him as they left to begin. Naruto, show us a hotspot or 2 so we can locate a mark to capture. And we'll get started on stealing a ship. We'll have a signal planned when it's done. We're clearing out when it goes off, no buts about it. Yamato said as he and Anko then departed to start on their leg of the assignment. Eliciting a sigh, Asuma stood up from where he had been resting and stretched his shoulders out. That Yamato, he's a great ninja, but he's kind of a wet blanket. He's trying to hide it better than Anko, but he's just as jazzed up for this mission as Anko is. Of course, Yamato's attitude was probably better for running an S-rank mission like this than Asuma's, and he knew it, so it wasn't a problem. Maybe he'll loosen up when we're not sneaking past a town that's 100 strong in a ninja force. Haku was still smiling pleasantly like normal outside of battle as she gave her immediate supplies one last run through to make sure she was ready. Your village certainly has a varying range of attitudes in its shinobi. It's interesting. She then placed her white and red porcelain mask over her face to disguise her features. Shall we begin as well then? With Team 10, Hills of Degarashi Port. No such look on locating anything other than a grunt roaming the streets. Just how many in Orochimaru's organization happened to be considered strong and skilled enough to be given sensitive information? There was a difference between a Chunin or a Jonin of Otogaku and an executive, so to speak, and that was clear when the conversations between them went up. A great amount of them were prisoners that were held by Orochimaru's bases for future experiments that showed some kind of talent in the shinobi arts to save their asses before they met the cutting tables and laboratory trials, and from there they were given uniforms and missions. What were they going to do? Say no. They'd be killed, or even worse be sent right back to their cells to wait to be turned into human lab mice. They weren't given info and they didn't care. As long as they weren't behind bars hearing the screams of the unfortunate bastards taken to be gifted with one of Otogaku's physical modifications or mutations. Hell, the ones that survived those were given places in Orochimaru's forces as well. It simply wasn't good enough for the 3 interlopers. What were they supposed to do? They had until the signal to head to the docks went off to find one, or else they'd be sailing into Mizu no Kuni without good information. That would be no good. Haku only knew so much, and all she knew was from the Kirigaku side of the scenario, which meant no enemy secrets, so when they landed on one of Mizu no Kuni's islands they could be landing right on a hidden Oto stronghold. There had to be more than a few if they had such a vicious foothold in the country. Some deducing needed to be done in order to get some information on which waterways to use, where to avoid, and maybe just what was going on with Otagakure. The first idea brought forth by Shikamaru was to steal some shipping manifests from the docks, but that plan was a no-go. Geto owned the ports of the town completely. It was his property. Who the hell did he have to keep records for legitimate business for? There was no real law enforcement anywhere in the elemental nations outside of the martial settlements like ninja villages and other military towns. Ino then shimmered and snarkily once their thoughts brought up nothing worth any substance. Geez. Why don't we just grab that little toad Geto then? I'm pretty sure if he saw a Konoha ninja up close again he'd crap a brick after what Goldie-kun and Team 7 did to his men on the bridge last time. All three of them stopped in the middle of tracking another groups from their hiding place on the rooftops, and both males of Team 10 stared at Ino blankly, getting her to fidget a bit uncomfortably at the attention. Shikamaru was the first to blink himself out of the stupor, as he more or less figured that they didn't have any better ideas, so why not? That actually wasn't a bad idea. Shikamaru was kind of stunned that it came from Ino. Nothing against her, but the last thing he remembered about her was that while her personality was strong, her clutch tactical value left a bit to be desired. But back to Geto, he was the #1 man of the waterways of the world, and he was on Konoha's shit list anyway, so they would have been good there. Upon reaching Geto's mansion, both Shikamaru and Ino had to pay attention to something that Naruto had neglected to mention. Geto actually had the gall to move into the abandoned Wasabi family mansion after he had chased the two warring groups out of town upon buying up most of Degarashi Port's property. The mansion grounds were split between 3 buildings set at the edges of a beautiful center garden a quarter of a mile around. They already knew which one was the main house as well, because they had stayed inside of it during their last venture in the town as guests of their client. While Naruto would stay outside and make sure that things stayed cool out there in case something went wrong, both Ino and Shikamaru went inside to capture Geto without a fuss. Upon their infiltration, Ino broke off from Shikamaru to clear the house and quickly dispose of any posted sentries, of which there were over a dozen. Her poison-covered senbon were perfect for that approach, and her aim was as impeccable as ever, rendering Geto's closest protection detail useless with quick pricks to the neck for quick circulation. Shikamaru's approach through the house was notably more peaceful. All he did was ensure that all of the rooms on the way to the master bedroom were clear of any guests. He doubted Geto had anyone that considered him good enough company to stay in his home anyway, so it was really just for safety's sake. The pair reconvened outside of the closed and locked door of Geto's master bedroom. I really hope he's asleep, Ino whispered as she began picking the lock. The only way him being awake would have been funny would have been if Goldie-kun had come inside with us and he remembered what he looked like from 3 years ago. Aside from that possibility, Geto being awake would just be annoying. The lock softly tumbled open and Ino had a senbon with sleeping poison prepared as Shikamaru opened the door and led the way inside. After subduing Geto and preparing him to leave, they'd be out of there just like that. Naruto would probably impatiently complain that it took too long, but 3 to 5 minutes wasn't that long when they were taking care. Meanwhile, outside of Geto's mansion, Ino and Shikamaru weren't going to blitz the place. Shikamaru liked to take things nice and easy, and he'd be a stickler for making sure the site was clear before moving forward to extract Geto. That was all well and good, but it was going to take up to 5 minutes to completely check the entire place. He should have sent in a clone with them. A clone's repeatedly heckling would have made things go faster. In the meantime, he was playing a human sonar system on the large roof that sloped upwards on all sides to a single steeple point in the middle of the mansion. It was the trademark of the mansion and what made it so easy to find from anywhere in town, because it was such a tall piece of architecture. It had been done by Geto, probably to signify that it was him that lived there. Why do we like high places so much? Naruto idly wondered to himself as he stood on the very pinnacle of the roof looking down through the mist that covered everything. Even though he couldn't use his eyes, he still had Shakura Hankyuti to no Jutsu, Chakra Echolocation Jutsu, to help him out. He could keep watch over the area just fine from where he was standing. Well, it does make it easier to use my jutsu, so I guess there's that. A recent use of the chakra pulse technique led him on to the fact that there was something sailing through the air right at him. In response, Naruto drew his machete and quickly blocked a series of small projectiles that had been sent his way. Wasting no more time as a sitting duck, Naruto dropped from the steeple and slid down the tiles of the massive roof to a more level position, his eyes fixed on the direction that the weapons thrown at him came from. He had to bare his teeth in something of a snarl at the person he saw on the roof with him. What were the chances? It was none other than Gurren. I haven't felt that much chakra from one person in a long time. The powerful crystal-creating woman said with a smirk at Naruto, my crystal ball picked up on your signature when you started letting those little pulses of yours go. I was on the grounds as well, so it's not like it was hard to find you. Way to survive our last little meeting, sweetie. She was there too? Why was she in the same damn town right when he had come back for his mission? At some point coincidence stopped and divine conspiracy began. Gurren. Naruto was never going to forget the person that dealt him the most savage beating he had ever endured in his entire career, maybe his entire life. You still look the same. You definitely grew up though. Her smirk widened when she saw his hands twitching down at his side. You're still just the same old little boy though. It's nice to see that some things never change. Apparently the ass-kicking that nearly took his life hit home all those years ago. Kill him. He was scared of her. And the multiple Otogakure shadows that leapt into the air from underneath the sides of the roof were willing and able to take advantage of that, planning to pounce on Naruto at once and end him without delay, per the orders of their mistress. Gurren's deduction of Naruto wasn't really correct though. Not really. Fear wasn't why he had been shaking. A nice guy? Yeah, there were a few people in the world that could and would label Naruto that. Only people that liked him, and there were only so many of those. On the other hand, Naruto was also one to hold grudges, and he never forgot the bad things that happened to him even if he was better at hiding the effects of some than others. Some of those bad things, such as how he watched his friends nearly die at Gurren's hands while he was trapped inside of a crystal, or how she seemed to toy with them as if they were nothing when they were giving her their best shots, things like that tended to stand the test of time and stick with him. So at heart he was actually pretty vengeful when it came to hurting the people he loved. Not nice, and not afraid. Definitely never afraid. As the Otogakure attackers landed and proceeded to stab into Naruto with their kunai, they were in for a rude awakening when it was revealed that they had actually stabbed one of their own, one of the men that had actually been jumping through the air along with them, intent on killing the Konoha ninja that was their target. On his body, on the chest of the recently killed man, a seal with 4 diagonal markings in adjacent corners with a pair of bars in the middle of them appeared before jumping off of his body around all of the Oto shinobi that had launched the attack to begin with. Yura Shishao Fuinjutsu, reverse 4 symbols sealing technique. Everything caught within the range of the expanded seal markings got drawn into the dead Oto shinobi's corpse, including a big portion of the roof and his comrades that had been responsible for striking with the death blows that killed him. Gurren meanwhile had never lost track of Naruto's movements, keeping her eyes on him as he moved to a different portion of the roof, glaring at her seriously, so that Uzumaki in his name isn't just for show. He didn't look a thing like that clan with that yellow hair of his, but with a few injutsu like that, there's no question that he's got some kind of connection. The 4 symbols sealing style was supposed to be the telltale trademark of the Uzumaki clan. Very difficult. Well, he just used one like it was his trademark sealing style. That one was supposed to be a suicide seal, only activated upon expiration of one's life, meant to take one's enemy with them immediately in case victory was unobtainable and death was the only option available. It was difficult to understand and apply, and usually had to be prepared well in advance. Not only did he apply it to another ninja in the middle of battle, but he did so while he had used a kawarimi with the very same person. Well, it looks like someone's been putting some fertilizer on their balls for the last few years. Gurren quipped, downplaying just how impressive Naruto's opening move was, but you should know, I'm not as easy to trap as the scum you just rid me of. I know. You're an Otogakure elite. Naruto said, remembering just like yesterday how all of the brute force he could muster wasn't enough to stop Gurren from stomping a mudhole in him last time around before another thought came to mind, just what I need. I'm not your type, kid. Naruto let out a grunt to acknowledge her witty remark as he placed a cigarette from the pack in his supply pouch in his mouth. You don't mind, do you? Do you want one? I roll them myself. He asked casually, extending his arm with the pack her way. Well, the clones do anyway. No, I don't smoke. Gurren replied with a smile on her ruby-red lips. This cheeky little punk had a set on him, that was for sure. I'll let my prey enjoy one last cigarette though. I'm not heartless, you know. Great. Naruto chirped happily as he gleefully lit the stick up in his mouth and took a few deep breaths of smoke that he then exhaled. Good for you that you don't smoke too. It's a nasty habit. A lot of people think it's annoying in public, girls don't like it, and not to mention what I heard it does to your health. Your health. Not my health. I'm a bit different from other people when it comes to that. A few laughs came from Gurren as she crossed her arms over her chest and let Naruto smoke away. Well then why do you do it? It can't be just to flaunt your little regenerative powers that you're gifted with through the Kyuubi. Bantering with him was definitely fun now that he had lines other than that he was going to kick her ass. You didn't really give me a reason why. Well, it's kind of soothing. It calms my nerves a bit, kind of like right now. I need it before fighting someone like you, heh. Naruto admitted, but that's not a really good reason. There's lots of stuff that's soothing that doesn't piss off so many people. No, I do this for a different reason now. Let me guess, you're a pest, so you do it just to pester others around you. Noticing that Naruto's cigarette had finished burning down to the very butt of it, she was through sparing an old enemy any other concessions. Time's up. She made a move to start her hand seals to begin a jutsu and Naruto did the same though he only needed one, Mogurinagare no Jutsu, Cinder Stream Jutsu. Holding his hands in the horse seal, Naruto took a deep breath and exhaled a hot plume of ash from his mouth in the direction of his foe that covered his movements and forced Gurren to look away lest her eyes be injured by the tangible debris in the cloud. Gurren didn't take too kindly to such a jutsu. The grimy makeup of the technique's physical attributes were disgusting to her. She didn't want to be covered in ashes even if they wouldn't hurt her. These most certainly would from the feel of the fire-less heat coming from the jutsu that she dodged. Forming 4 hand seals, a blade of crystal formed on her forearm. Her reason being that she eyed Naruto's movements from behind his own cloud. It was only 1 too, and this guy never used just one clone to fight. Why would he when he had so many more that he could make? Deducing that it was real, she sped over and quickly sliced through it only to find her blade covered with sticky black ash. A clone. A clone of substance, ash to be exact. But ash wasn't that sticky, so why was it stuck to her blade? Trying to wipe it off smudged her hand and made it somewhat sticky. Ash wasn't really sticky either. What the hell kind of ashes were these? So you've just spent the last 3 years getting weirder? Gurren asked as she saw Naruto prepared to charge her down. He delivered a kick that she blocked with her forearms, but it sent her sliding back across the roof, damaging and busting up tiles until she came to a stop. What kind of techniques were those? Ashes from wood, ashes from volcanoes, no ashes are like yours. Nah, volcano ash would be hotter, but I don't need it to be hotter. Naruto said, watching her warily in case she attacked him again. No, my ashes are a bit more common. I bet you didn't notice how the entire time I smoked that cigarette I never tapped it off, but you never saw any burnt up ends on it. The eyes of the wickedly strong woman widened in realization. Yep, they're like super hot cigarette ashes. That was why the ashes were sticky. The reheated tobacco residue and chemicals in the ashes gave it that kind of consistency. But there was only one way he could actually do something like that to himself. Shaking her head, Gurren couldn't believe what she was hearing. That's insane. You can use the crap that smoking puts in your lungs to help you fight. Why not? Naruto said, all I had to do was figure out how. It doesn't really poison me because of the Kyuubi, and if it doesn't kill you it just makes you stronger. Those are just a few of the moves I've come up with too. It didn't matter in the end though. When push came to shove, a few little nifty tricks like that wouldn't get through to her in the end. Her crystals could still defend her. He'd never get through to her directly with any of that. It was cute that he'd learned something new, and it probably would have been effective on others, but Gurren wasn't weak like them. Your seals and your ashes are useless against me. Gurren said with more confidence than ever now that she had seen Naruto's new techniques. You still don't have what it takes to get through my crystals, and that means your fate is sealed. I'll make sure you don't escape and survive this time. Because he was dangerous. Uzumaki clansmen were notorious for many reasons, and Naruto had just exhibited a few of those reasons. If he really was of that clan, then she had to kill him. There was a reason there were so many that were afraid of them at their height. Not backing down an inch, Naruto just prepared himself to fight for as long as he needed to. No matter what, he had to make this quick before Shikamaru and Ino made it outside with Geto, and especially before the signal to reach the stolen ship went up. Because he was pretty sure Gurren wouldn't accept a tactical retreat or any kind of outcome other than complete victory. And a Pyrrhic victory was no good for Naruto. He needed to win and be fit to carry on with the mission. He couldn't fight like a reckless idiot this time. No, not tonight. Omake, Guardian Days 1. 3 years ago, one day after Naruto and Shikamaru's acceptance. This training is lame. Naruto said with a thumbs down as he and Shikamaru stood outside in the front of the Guardian Ninja quarters. Both of them stood before the two other members of the group, the blind de facto leader Sadeo, and the clinically insane yet very pleasant songstress assassin Suzukuro Kotoko. I thought Ninja Guardian training was supposed to be like boot camp from hell. Well, it's definitely not supposed to be easy, dear. Kotoko said, still smiling with her eyes closed as they usually seemed to be. Her head tilted slightly in cute confusion at what Naruto's problem was. What's wrong with the training? Wordlessly, but with a twitching eye, Naruto held up a watermelon half his size. Both he and Shikamaru had been given large watermelons and had been told to protect them as if they were clients. This struck a nerve with Naruto, considerably so as a matter of fact. Really? You're asking me that? Sadeo rolled his eyes behind his dark sunglasses, not that anyone could see it though. Listen, your standards for protecting your clients on your little C-rank missions before this might have flown back in Konoha where you were nameless, faceless Chunin, but here we need you to be better than that. These are nobles. If you fuck up protecting someone here and they get hurt, you might end up starting something huge. Do you want to be the reason the Fourth Shinobi World War starts? Naruto stared at the young man owlishly and shook his head. No, then you're protecting the watermelon. At that point Shikamaru lazily waved his hand to get some attention, which Kotoko gave him by pointing over at him in a bubbly and animated fashion. Yes, Shika-kun. Do you have a question for your lovely senpai? That woman seriously gave him the creeps. There was just no getting around it. Ugh, so what happens if we can't keep the melons safe? And how long are we doing this for? A rather malicious grin formed on Sadeo's face at Shikamaru's questioning, one that sent chills down the pair of Konoha ninjas' spines. You have to keep the melon safe for 48 whole hours. If you sandbag your shit and fail on purpose, or if you suck so bad that you can't keep the melons safe for 2 whole days, then you don't get to move on to the next stage of the training. You do get to eat the melon though. Kotoko added in what she thought was a helpful manner. Sadeo palmed his forehead at how Kotoko broke his swagger. She was a fantastic shinobi and probably the best pure killer in the country, but dammit if she wasn't the grandest airhead he had ever met in his entire life. Yes, you get to eat the melon. But not only do you not move on from here, your first missions will be a protection detail. Both Naruto and Shikamaru looked at each other before turning back to their seniors. That didn't sound so bad. Then he pointed over to a long row of 12 tall posts that stood out at the very front of the Ninja Guardian property. You get to protect the wooden posts outside since you clearly can't be trusted to handle something as important as a watermelon. Sadeo said seriously, even though a small smile started to form on his face. You're going to do it with your bodies, because we're going to tie you to the stumps in your underwear. Wait. That's what those stupid things are for? Naruto asked aloud. He just thought that they were supposed to be there for a big fence or a wall of a gatehouse. Just something or another that they hadn't built yet. Oh yeah. Sadeo said before whispering loudly, and I'll let you in on a little secret. Soldiers hate wooden poles. They throw eggs and tomatoes and stuff at the posts all the time, or is it just the tied-up rookies that they don't like? With a hapless shrug he let the point drop, and you get to do that for 2 days straight before you have to repeat the test until you get it right. And if you fail again the same thing will happen. And so on, and so on. Oh, so now they could see the boot camp from hell aspect that they had been missing so far. I had to do it like 12 times because I kept killing my client by accident. Kotoko reminisced with a giggle. Yep. Again, and again, and again, and again. Kotoko repeated in a sing-song voice as she did pirouettes around both Naruto and Shikamaru, and again, and again, and again dash dot. Kotoko, stop. I think they get it. Sadeo said, getting her to stop next to him obediently as if she had never moved. It wasn't that bad though. Kotoko commented as she tapped on her chin, at least it left me alone with my thoughts. That was a scary thought for everyone else out there with her. Idly Sadeo wondered if his conditioning of Kotoko as a ninja guardian was part of the reason she was so horribly imbalanced. So anyway, just go about your business like normal, but don't let those melons out of your sight, because if those melons take any fatal damage, you fail. Getting tied to a post for 2 days and having jerk soldiers haze you by throwing crap at you sounded horrible. That was enough motivation for Shikamaru, who started thinking of what he was going to do during meal times, and how he was going to rest, since he'd be damned if he was going to sleep for the next 2 days. Just how hard were they going to try and go for those melons? And when they started, were they going to be attacked immediately? There were so many things unaccounted for with this test. You can try and get my melon, I'll kick your ass every time you try. Naruto exclaimed before the large fruit slipped from his grasp and went splat on the hard ground beneath him. Doesn't count. He ventured desperately. Both Sadeo and Kotoko shook their heads and wordlessly pointed towards the stumps, one with a far more pleasant disposition than the other, indicating that Naruto was to walk over there and wait for them to get Shikamaru situated with the rest of his briefing. Then they would tie his ass to a post for 2 days. Well, he wasn't about to just lay down and take that, and prepared to run until he heard some chilling laughter as Kotoko plucked a few notes out on her shamisen. Foo. Sadeo-kun, take a look at little Naruto. He thinks he's going to run. Please run, Naruto. I want you to. Don't do it, man. Shikamaru thought to himself. He was about to try and catch Naruto with his shadow to keep him from making a break for it, because even after knowing her for only 1 day, he swore that Kotoko would probably get too overstimulated by the chase and kill him by accident when she tried to bring him back alive. Especially if he tried to use clones. I already know how this story ends. It was probably the longest 10 seconds that Naruto had ever taken to think about doing something, but eventually he conceded and walked over to the stump with the most hangdog look conceivable on his whisker-marked face. All right. 2 days. He could do that, he was tough enough. He had to be. You guys are gonna feed me, right? The 2 senior ninja guardians had differing outlooks on that inquiry. Maybe, if I care or remember to give you food or water. Meh, you'll live. Yes. He's so cute and I get to feed him like a puppy. A big orange tied-up puppy. What's a good name for a puppy? I know. I'll call you Naruto. For the love of Kami Kotoko, do you ever listen to yourself talk? Why would I do that? I'm not talking to myself, I'm talking to you, silly. Shikamaru just looked at Naruto slogging away and then down at his melon. Then he looked at his 2 senior members of the Ninja Guardians and felt something inside of himself break. Oh. I made a mistake. I seriously made a mistake. He said to himself miserably, we never should have come here, Naruto. He yelled at his friend, who seemed to be trying to find the most comfortable position against his post of choice to be tied to. That's it for part 21. Thank you for watching and see you on the next video.